Prosopopoeia is not common in the Greek orators, who, it seems to me, were better at using apostrophe, or turning aside to address someone or something other than the audience, usually one's opponent in a hostile way, as Usher. The effect at times must have been quite profound. I mentioned earlier the apostrophe at the end of Isaiah 5, which ends with one of the longest character assassinations in Athenian oratory, sections 35 to 47. Aeschines, as is well known, was a tragic actor, a third-rate one, according to his enemy Demosthenes. And it is to Isaiah's pupil that I turn for that last word on the topic. Page after page of personal abuse of Aeschines in On the Crown finally reaches the nub of the matter. For if the city chose to surrender without a fight the position that our forefathers faced every danger to acquire, who would not have spat on you? Not indeed on the city, not on me. Note the onomatopoeic kateptusen in the Greek, spat, as well as the paraprostokian, saying something that is unexpected, with the you replacing the expected us at the end. And the pupil clearly learned well. Thank you for your kind attention. About 50 minutes.
Sorry?
About 15 minutes.
Oh, we're absolutely fine, I think, for time. Yes, thank you very much. That was very clear and very nice in the way that you knitted together Greek and Roman and brought in so many different examples and orators and ideas. I wonder perhaps if I could ask the first question, if I'm allowed to do that as the introducer. You touched on something that's always really puzzled me, and this is Cicero's remark about the three styles, the grand, the plain, the middle, and the grand. And he says that different speeches are written in different styles, and I've never understood this. It seems to me that there are different parts of particular speeches are in different styles or different registers, that the narration, well, if you look around to try and find something in the plain style, it'll often be a narration that you pick. If you look around for something in the grand style, well, typically it's the peroration of every speech. And if you look around for something that we can say that's in the middle style, well, you'll go for a passage of quite spirited, lively argumentation, perhaps. And it doesn't seem to me to fall, each speech is in one style. It seems to me that it's varied. And so I can't understand why Cicero should say this, and it just doesn't conform with his own practice. It doesn't seem to make sense to me. And I wonder perhaps if that problem had occurred to you, and if you have any solution or insight into that.
Yes and no. I don't understand this either. A good example from Lysias is speech 1, where the beginning of the speech is very carefully, highly wrought, put together very carefully. And then you have this wonderful narrative, which now most scholars just simply don't believe, but it's so simple that it's very persuasive and seductive. And you can say similar things about most of the speeches. Probably Isocrates would be an exception, I think, where he does seem to have a consistent and consistently intricate style, I think, through most of the works. Although they're not speeches, of course, most of them. But I entirely agree with you that you can find examples of narratives tend to be simpler, proofs tend to be a bit more elaborate, and then, as you say, the beginning and the endings tend to be much more elaborate. And this is a pattern that repeats and repeats itself. Yes.
But does this make sense with some Greek orators? Is Cicero maybe taking over a Greek practice and unthinkingly saying that this occurs in oratory when it doesn't occur in his own practice? Do you
I
think
think it goes back to people like Dionysius who are saying this as well. Dionysius picks out, people who are the different exemplars of three different styles.
Yeah.
Lysias being the plain style, Antiphon is an example of a grand style, and of course Demosthenes is the best because he can mix them all. But it is partly, I think, what I said earlier about the comparison in his essay on Isaeus with between Isaeus and Lysias, that he's bound to compare Isaeus unfavourably with Lysias because Lysias is his model. So if Isaeus is as good, he's got the wrong model. But this kind of analysis goes on from Dionysius and other people writing on literary criticism, and into perhaps Cicero maybe earlier than that. But yes, I don't see that there's. It's very difficult to find a speech that is written in a single style, and it would probably be unsuccessful. Can you think of a Cicero? And the opening of the Procailio is not typical of the rest of it.
Well, I think Proarchia doesn't rise to the grand style because the defendant is such a humble person, I think, that it's actually quite difficult to
on in theory, yes, appropriateness. But it still isn't the same simple all the way through.
There still is variation, yes, absolutely.
And of course, Variatio, Metabile was another sought after.
Just to pick up on Dominic's point, the Homeric Scholia, the PT exegetical Scholia on Iliad 3:200 or so, describes Menelaus, of course, as the low style corresponding to Lysias. Nestor, I think, is the middle style corresponding to Isocrates, and Odysseus is Demosthenes. It's already sort of exemplified in the Homeric poetry, the three types of oratory, which I guess is much, you can see the differences in their oratory in Homer, so it's already sort of very much embedded in the tradition of commentary.
And of course, Homer invents everything. Can you detect differences in their speaking? I'm not sure.
I think it's not so much that as the fact that there's the description of how Odysseus speaks.
Of course,
not his actual words, but it's this thing about him looking down and holding his staff and pouring the voice from his chest. And I think that's what allows it to be qualified as the grand style.
And Menelaus, of course, is just straight to the point, and it's brevity that's emphasised in Menelaus, so lack of flowing on. But I guess there are far more clues in Homer than in Plato.
You could look at different speeches, say of Thucydides. The famous one, of course, is Sthenelaidas in Book 1, the Spartan, which is much shorter. So stop wasting time and get on with it. But I'm not sure that the style of it is particularly different from other speeches. I mean, you could compare Cleone and Diodotus in Book 3 as well. I think people are beginning to do this. You can do it with Xenophon. But they clearly have different effects, yes. But to say that a speech is in that style is not what actually happens. Okay.
It's maybe an example of where something gets said in rhetoric and then it gets repeated and repeated and repeated, and that's not actually what happens in practice, but yet that is the embedded theory. But it's strange that somebody like Cicero, who knew that wasn't the case, should still say this and give this out as being advice to people who wish to learn oratory.
Yeah. a lot more to do on that.
Yes.
Everything.
Absolutely. Other observations or questions? Yes, Mirko.
Yeah, just a chicken and egg question, in particular when it comes to the Actic orators. So, how much of what we find, for example, in Aristotle about all these, do you think is empirical, observational? How much do you think is prescriptive, normative? Where do you think is the divide? Because sometimes when he talks, for example, about the difference between mechanic speech and deliberative speech and pedagogic speech, we find a very clear distinction, for example, between useful and just, and between past and future, reflected upon even in the speeches of the orators or even in Thucydides, for instance. But then, for example, as you were noticing, when it comes to prose style and the pianist, where is he getting that? He's certainly not in the speeches. He's noticing that there is some kind of prose rhythm, and then he's deciding what it should be. It seems to be the case. So where do you think we stand there?
As you say, it's chicken and egg, isn't it? That raises another big topic, which I did write about briefly once, and others have written about since, as to Aristotle's non-use of the orators to illustrate his rhetoric, using poetry far more. There are very few references to the orators in Aristotle, especially, of course, Demosthenes, because Demosthenes was the tutor of Alexander, whom Demosthenes was rivaling. I know this isn't answering your question, but you've kind of answered it, I think, yourself. There's also the problem of dating when the rhetoric was composed. I would tend to think that it's composed probably after nearly all of the speeches were actually written. So you might think that he would use the speeches as the examples, but he doesn't. And I've never understood that.
But do you think beyond Aristotle, do you think when Isaias was teaching Demosthenes, he was teaching any of this?
I don't know. And whether Dionysius's observations on Isaias being similarly forceful to Demosthenes, the problem then is that it becomes a circular argument that somebody may well have inferred from is the fact that Demosthenes in his early Guardian speeches does what no student is allowed to do and plagiarizes Isaias very closely. And it's an inference then that he's the teacher. But whether these traditions about Homer or anyone else in the ancient world, how much resemblance they bear to reality is another problem. It's hard to know. I would tend to think that the people teaching were doing it kind of strict rules that are fairly obvious. I mean, the last thing you need to use to teach someone rhetoric is Aristotle. And although I might go on YouTube and ruin my career, I think one of the worst things that's ever happened to rhetoric is the survival of Aristotle and not anything else, apart from the rhetoric to Alexander. That seems to me to be a much more practical guide to how you would compose speeches than the rhetoric. But I don't know if I'm out of line in saying that. But you couldn't use a lot of Aristotle's rhetoric if you're actually trying to teach somebody, I don't think.
I think that's my impression as well, yeah. You
could use Cicero more. Well, Quintilian, of course, would be the one you would turn to. And that is more explicitly a manual of instruction.
But if you're teaching, you're also going to want the published speeches as the great orators as well. And for example, to learn memory, you can't